Oh, thanks a lot. It's absolutely fantastic to be here tonight, especially to be sharing a stage with Izzy and Helen, two of the many lovely women whose videos I enjoy watching on the internet. My name's Jimmy Lou. I'm originally from Australia, Brisbane, and I came here about 2 years ago to start my PhD. I work out at the Wellcome Trust Sane Institute, where I do statistical genetics. So as I was preparing this, I was thinking that, what is statistical genetics? And one thing I did realise was that it's really not very funny. So the other day I sat in front of my computer about to start writing this material, and I did what most scientists do before they start researching a new topic. I went to Google, I typed in genetics jokes. I have to say the material that did come out was pretty poor, and most of them revolved around puns around the word gene, for example. Did you hear about the biologist who was really fashionable? He had designer genes. See what I mean? So I won't subject you to any of that for the rest of the evening. But statistical geneticists, the other thing I learned about it is that our job's kind of quite boring as well. So we're not like other biologists who get to go out in the field, collect samples or play with model organisms, mice, zebrafish, or I don't even get to wear a lab coat or do experiments. My job consists of sitting in an office in front of a computer, most of the time switching between doing proper work, Facebook and BBC Sport. Which I guess in one way is a good thing, because apart from the doing work bit, that's pretty much my weekends anyway. Having said that, my Facebook time at work has toned down a bit since my supervisor added me as a friend. Anyway, back to science. What is statistical genetics? So statistical geneticists study genetic variation. At the Sane Institute, we're very much interested in human genetic variation. I'm sure most of the people here in the room know DNA is a very large molecule that's found in the nucleus of each of our cells. It's made up of 4 different chemical compounds, which we refer to as the letters A, C, G, and T. And it's a sequence of these letters that determines what species you are and makes each of us unique. So the human DNA sequence contains about 3 billion pairs of these letters, which is huge, 25,000 genes. Not just in terms of the amount of data it contains, but just the physical size of it. So if you were to take all the DNA from one of your cells, stretch it out from that famous double helix shape, stretch it out in a straight line, it would go from the floor to above this roof, higher than this roof. In fact, if we took the DNA from all 30 trillion of your cells, took it out, unwound it, laid them out end to end, you'd probably be dead. So one way of thinking about genetic variation is to compare the DNA between individuals. If you, for example, take your own DNA and compare it with the person next to you, you might find 1 letter difference per every 1,000 letters or so. If it's more than 1,000 letters, anything significantly more, then you're probably sitting next to a parent or a sibling. And given that this is East Anglia, you're probably inbred. I hope you two aren't a couple. So the other cool things we can learn from comparing the DNA sequence of people is about our own ancestry. So what they found is, and I think this is quite poetic actually, is that when you compare the DNA from different populations all around the world, all Asians, Europeans, and basically all non-modern day Africans can trace their ancestry back to a single migration event out of Africa about 60,000 years ago. And this is quite good, because we also find out from DNA evidence that once we left Africa, we started shagging the local Neanderthals. Now they found this out by, a few years ago they discovered some Neanderthal DNA. And when they compared this DNA with that of modern humans, they found segments of, probably most people in this room will have segments of their DNA that are more closely related to Neanderthals than present-day Africans. Which I guess explains John Terry. Sorry, topical humour. So the other thing we learn from comparing people's DNA, and I guess this is my own research area too, is get to learn more about the nature of disease. Geneticists classify disease into two broad categories. Firstly, we have what are called Mendelian disorders, which are diseases that are caused by a single gene. In this case, if you have the gene, depending on the mode of inheritance, either recessive or dominant, you'll have the disease. So these include, they're usually rare diseases, so they include things like Huntington's, cystic fibrosis, being born a ginger, also some forms of diabetes. And to study these, we basically we look at families where some individuals have the disease and see how it segregates among family members. The other type of disease is what we call complex diseases. This doesn't sound as cool as Mendelian diseases, and I think it's kind of because we call them complex diseases so we geneticists could feel smarter than we actually are. So these diseases where it's multiple genetic variants across multiple genes, often hundreds, maybe even thousands, plus the environment that affects disease. So these include common diseases like type 1 and type 2 diabetes, mental disorders such as schizophrenia, depression, as well as most forms of cancers. Now, to study these diseases, the design is actually quite simple. We take a whole bunch of individuals with a particular disease and compare the DNA with a healthy population. So instead of, right now it's actually quite expensive to get all 3 billion letters from every individual, so instead we use what are called genetic markers. We take about 1 million of these markers that essentially mark out the spaces along the genome that commonly vary between individuals. And for each of these markers we do statistical tests and until we find a hit. So we basically keep trying until we find a positive outcome, and then we go and tell our friends about it, which kind of describes my dating life at the moment. And also, so yeah, once we get the positive outcome, we get to pull down the genes and find out more about biological function, which is actually nothing like my dating life. Sorry, I got that one off the internet. So lastly, we're actually at the stage where any individual can take their own DNA and have it analysed by a private genetic testing company. So I did this a few months ago. For about $300. I got sent a little plastic tube where I put my saliva in, sent it back, and got my results. So I log into a fancy website where they have things like disease risk, ancestry, my genetics for a whole bunch of different traits. So it was really eye-opening results. I found out that I have likely brown eyes, black hair, and am of East Asian origin. Which I think, really got my money's worth there. But probably the most interesting thing I found from this genetic testing was there's a gene that allows you to detect the smell of asparagus in your urine after you've eaten urine. I can't imagine how they came up with this study, or what was going through the scientist's head, or how they got funded. That's the most sensitive thing about this. But anyway, apparently I can detect the smell of asparagus in my urine after I piss. And I didn't know this before. I mean, this is not something you realise. So next time I had asparagus, sure enough. But no, this gene is actually quite interesting because we know it's associated with if you can smell asparagus or not, but we're actually not sure what it actually does. We're not sure if it's involved in the production of asparagus metabolites in our urine, or if it's actually part of the involved in olfactory receptors in our nose, whether or not we can detect certain odours. So I think the natural follow-up study is not to ask if you can smell asparagus in your own urine, but if you can smell it in someone else's urine. And I think this is one thing we can all, go home and have a try yourselves. So next time you have asparagus, find the nearest person, piss on them, and see if they mind. Alright, thanks very much.